Top executives from General Electric gathered with Boston's top business and political leaders yesterday to celebrate the company's move to Boston. The big headline that came from the event was GE's commitment to donate $50 million locally over 5 years, including $25 million for the city's public schools. It was a story picked up nationwide and celebrated by both Governor Charlie Baker and the mayor of Boston.
We have a piece of land that's generating a six-figure investment to the city of Boston, where we're going to get significantly more money to reinvest into our schools.
I don't view GE as just another business development win, okay? This is an investment that they are making in the business environment that was developed over the course of time.
Unimpressed were protesters outside the event who called attention to the $25 million in property tax abatements GE is getting from Boston, plus $120 million in state infrastructure, the possibility of the company that could pay no rent, and serious continuing environmental concerns in the western part of the state. Joining me are Jim Rooney, President and CEO of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce. Congratulations on the new job, well, relatively new job. John Chesto, business reporter of the Boston Globe, has been following the GE move since he broke the story in January. John, good to see you too. So tell me the primary benefit in your estimation, Jim Rooney, from GE coming to town, and what risks or possible downsides you see?
Well, anytime one of the largest companies in the world that has such a focus on innovation, technology, and growth chooses your city through a competitive process, they've spoken loud and clear to the rest of the country and indeed the world that this is the place that a company like that belongs. So that's a big plus, and it will have additional benefits over time that the governor and the mayor spoke about.
Any risks, downside in your estimation?
Well, this is like the Red Sox signing David Price. It's a high-profile signing, a lot of potential, a lot of positive, but then they have to prove themselves, and they have to actually deliver on the kinds of things that they say they will do.
Is that a fair assessment of the pros and cons, John?
I think so. I mean, this is an unprecedented relocation, corporate relocation of Boston. We haven't seen a corporate headquarters like this move here in our lifetimes. Mm-hmm. But it's also an unprecedented incentive on the state and city side. Not in recent memory has such a large property tax abatement been given out, nor such a large state grant award.
Would GE have come here had that $150 million and potentially no rent and whatever else is flowing from? Would they have come here had the package not been quite as generous as it is?
Well, what I will say is that there were, I have a good understanding that some of the offerings from other competitors were more generous financially.
Like where?
New York is definitely more generous, and there are a lot of things they like about Boston that don't have anything to do with the incentives. But what the Baker administration folks will say is we needed a seat at the table. We couldn't look silly. We had to pony up and play with the big boys.
Was this the price of admission, Jim, you think?
No,
price of admission?
I think what people have to realize is this is regional city competitiveness. This is the way the game is played. GE had far many more cities in mind that were made public. I've heard from people in other chambers across the country that either received calls or inquiries or that sort of thing. GE visited. Many cities put a lot more on the table. I don't think, you will ever know the answer to that question. Would they or wouldn't have they? That is the way the game is played. Cities put incentives on the table, and we played it. And
Let's
played
talk
it
about
well.
A couple of the concerns of the critics. It's fair to say that GE has elevated tax avoidance to an art form. 5 years, 2010 to 14, paid nothing in federal taxes, actually got a refund on $33 billion in profits. They pay, I read this in your paper, they pay taxes to states almost not at all. I asked the governor and the mayor if that came up in any of the conversations. Did you ever say to them, by the way, you're going to be paying taxes here? They said it never came up. I asked Steve Lynch today. He said Elizabeth Warren brought it up in a meeting with GE in Washington. Should that have not been part of the conversation, the quid and the quo, no?
Well, I don't think that specific history that you're alluding to came up. I mean, the mayor has made clear that they will be paying taxes going forward, some forms of property tax. So the elements of the deal on both sides, what the city's giving up and what they intend to get, were negotiated. Now, I'm not sure the degree to which it matters. Maybe it was in the governor's and the mayor's mind during the negotiations, but it doesn't need to be said. They were looking at
Why
what
does
is
it
in
need to
this-
be said? If it turns
Well,
out they have a practice of not paying taxes, which, by the way, no one's ever said it's illegal, but they have good lawyers. If the practice is not to pay taxes, and our commitment to you, or the government's commitment is concrete, the $140, $150 million and all this other stuff, we want a concrete commitment from you that you'll pay taxes at the effective corporate tax rate, no?
Well, there are commitments to pay taxes. I mean, the mayor has made it clear, as I said. And I think with the gift and the goodwill that
50 million.
GE demonstrated yesterday, they are deliberately and wisely, I think, demonstrating to people that it's not all about that. There are ways in which they will contribute to this community that don't necessarily have to be giving it to government. They can give it directly to those purposes that they think will continue the
But they
economic
decide,
growth.
not our elected
Well, it was
officials.
negotiated with the mayor and the governor.
Was it? Were those?
Oh, absolutely. One
You
of the
think
things
those-
that Jeff Immelt said yesterday was that category of workforce development was specifically
Is what the city and state wanted.
discussed by the governor.
You know, Jim Rooney's mentioned property taxes on a couple of occasions, and you wrote a story the other day. They may end up paying tens of millions in property taxes. But another writer for your paper, your colleague Beth Healy, said they challenge property tax assessments virtually every single place they are in America. So the operative word in your opening line may end up paying. They could challenge the assessments here too. They'll pay something, as Jim says, but it could be a dramatically reduced property tax figure. No, I mean that's their
It's
MO.
true. What's in process now are negotiations, because this is going to be a very complicated incentive deal. It's not just, oh, okay, you can have $25 million off your taxes the next 20 years. You know, as you probably know, the Boston Redevelopment Authority is getting involved with some of the ownership of the two buildings on that property that they're moving into. And so the city and GE are negotiating now on what kind of taxes GE should pay over that 20-year period.
There's also one other issue. It's been mentioned, I'm sure you guys both are aware of it. It's not part of your jurisdiction as the Boston Chamber, but GE admits having polluted the Housatonic River in Western Mass for 50 years. And it's currently at odds with the EPA over the cleanup. GE wants to remove far less sludge than requested and wants to be exempt from the mandate that it be moved out of state. Well, last night, GBH's Adam Riley asked GE's CEO if the company is thinking differently now that they're based here.
You know, again, we have just completed a huge dredging project on the Hudson River. We spent $500 million on the first project on the Housatonic. You know, it's our intention to work well with the governor and with the EPA to do another successful project on the Housatonic. You know, we have a certain perspective on how we think it should be done, and we plan to stand up for what we think's right. But you know, we've done more dredging than any other company on earth, I'd have to say.
You know, Jim, again, we said it's not part of the greater Boston.
Yeah.
So I asked Charlie Baker this, the governor, as well. Did you raise this in the negotiations? And he said it's a separate issue.
Yeah.
It'll be dealt with separately. That's a pretty dramatic issue within our border. Is it
Yeah.
not a pretty major dispute?
Well, it's a big issue. I think the governor characterizing it as a separate issue that should be negotiated and discussed in and of itself is probably the right approach. And it is not unusual when any entity gets involved in a cleanup situation for there to be differences of opinion as to how far to go with that cleanup. I've been involved in cleanups myself, and you know, you want to do what's right, but at the same time, in my case, I was spending taxpayers' money. You want to be responsible with the money that you're spending.
Are the people in Western Mass happy with that answer? I mean, the governor's answer is sort of like Jim Rooney's. We'll deal with it separately, be patient, and that sort of. Are they content?
I would say, judging from the comments I've heard, probably not. I mean, but a lot of that, I think, is anger over the original pollution, which is
50 years. And GE admits, by the way, the PCBs, they don't deny that they
I
were
mean,
dumping in the river.
it's really terrible what's happened to the Housatonic, and I don't know if they'll ever forgive that. And of course, in Pittsfield, the economy's been hollowed out. GE was a major player there at one time, and there's barely anything left of them. So there's some bad blood. And GE, I've spoken to many people at GE about this. They want to clean it up. This is a case of sort of the sins of the fathers being visited upon the children, and they are trying to do their best. Now, of course, the version they want is not as expensive as the version the EPA wants. But their argument is we should have some flexibility in cleaning this up, or otherwise we're going to be fighting about it forever.
So have they joined the Boston Chamber of Commerce? That should have been my first question. Have they?
No, not officially. But
What do you mean not officially?
We've had conversations, and
Why are you
they'll
not
be
looking at
joining.
me when you're saying that? Is
Well,
an
I mean, it
announcement
hasn't
about to be made?
No, it hasn't happened. So, you know, I have no news to break.
When you do, I'm your
I'll
guy.
give you a call.
Jim Rooney, it's good
Yeah,
to see you.
thank you.
John Chester, thanks so
Thanks
much
for having me.
Appreciate it.